We've got a great show planned for you all and a great guest. Today we'll be discussing D.B. Cooper and a BYU student named Richard Floyd McCoy, who may have been Cooper. In a moment, we'll go to our guest with us on the air, an author and former FBI agent and former head of the FBI field office, Russell Kalaim. Russell is a veteran, served as a captain of artillery against Germany in World War II. He spent his life in the service of his country, and we are honored to have him with us today on the air. In 1991, Russell co-authored a book with Bernie Rhodes, also a former FBI agent, called D.B. Cooper, The Real McCoy. I first read this book about 7 years ago, then again a few weeks ago, and it is the most fascinating book on D.B. Cooper out there. Most of our listeners are no doubt familiar with the skyjacking story this explores, but for those of you who aren't, a few statements of background information. In November 1971, a male Caucasian using the name Dan Cooper hijacked Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 between Portland and Seattle and parachuted from the rear stairs with $200,000. He was never found. A few of the bills, about $5,900 worth, turned up several years later, excavated from a sandbar along the Columbia River. The Cooper hijacking remains the only unsolved hijacking in American history. Well, 5 months later, there was a second hijacking in which a BYU Mormon Sunday school teacher named Richard Floyd McCoy, using the alias James Johnson, hijacked United Airlines Flight 855 and parachuted in the dark from the rear stairs with $500,000 over Provo. He was caught and convicted the next year in 1972 in Salt Lake City, and after serving only 2 years of his 45-year sentence, he escaped, was later killed by the FBI. Now, we've got Russell with us. Let me go to the telephones now. Russell, are you with us?
Yes.
Thank you for being with us on the air today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, your book, I found it fascinating. Before we start discussing it, can you tell us, how can our listeners get a copy of this?
I bought it's a hardbound, and I bought what was left after the University of Utah, did its marketing. Usually they'll keep a book a couple of years and they'll market it, and then anything left over, the author or whoever gets a shot at purchasing.
Okay. Is there a way that our listeners can contact you to get copies if they can?
My email is maryruss21 at AOL.
And this interview repeated at the end of the show. I thought your book was the best book on D.B. Cooper that I've ever read.
Well, we think it is the best. And we think, too, that Bernie and I, Bernie Rhodes and I, are the only ones that have really put out in writing our belief. Now, nobody's torn it down, really seriously brought up anything that changes what we say. I don't mean to say there are no errors in there. I'm sure you never know all the answers. You can be married for 60 years and you don't know everything about your wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that we have, some unknown things. What we did before we really started writing was list all the things we thought were the similarities and the sames, and then we also listed all the disparities, all the differences.
Now, before we start talking about those similarities and differences, can you give us a quick background information? I gave a little bit, but I wanted to leave it to you to give a little more. Background information on D.B. Cooper and on Richard Floyd McCoy and the two hijackings. How were you involved? Were you investigating those hijackings with the Bureau?
Well, yes. The short answer is yes. The first one, D.B. Cooper, the Dan Cooper name, was out of the Seattle office. And the Seattle office became the so-called Office of Origin or control office. The second one, of course, was out of our territory. And so the Richard Floyd McCoy case became a Salt Lake City control case. Now that's the difference there, is just who's control. When Seattle, after Richard Floyd McCoy jump, Seattle could see some similarities, and they had us do a lot of groundwork. I don't think we ever proved it conclusively at the time, although we did try.
Let me throw the phone numbers out really quickly for listeners who would like to call in. Salt Lake 254-5855, Provo 470-5855, and Ogden 670-5855. We're talking to Russell Kalame about the...
Can I correct you on two things?
Sure.
One, Bernie Rhodes was not an FBI agent. Bernie was the chief U.S. probation officer under Judge Ritter.
Okay.
And he was the original idea to write the book.
Okay.
He pulled me into it because he couldn't do it alone without knowing about the investigation details. My name is Callum rather than Kalame. Now, it's pronounced Kalame, but we pronounce it Callum. So that straightens that out.
Okay. And we tried to get a hold of Bernie, but he seems to have disappeared.
Well, Bernie's probably in Florida.
And that's what Judge Winder told us as well. He was going to come on the air, but felt that there would be some problems with attorney-client privilege and things. He represented McCoy. We'll talk about that later before he became a judge. Yeah,
Judge Winder, of course, is a very close personal friend of Bernie Rhodes and knows exactly who it is, like I do at all times, because we're in regular contact.
Well, we have a list of questions here we'd like to ask you about your book and about the McCoy and D.B. Cooper hijackings. But just to remind our listeners, before we start, in 1971, a man named Dan Cooper got on this Flight 305 and ransomed the passengers. What exactly happened? He ransomed them with a grenade or a gun?
Yes, he threatened them. He was going to destroy, in part at least, the plane enough that would cause it to have an accident, terrible accident.
And he was hiding at the back of the plane wearing a wig. He was
riding actually in the last row of seats on that particular configuration of 707. Now, the 707 was the only plane that had the aft staircase that could be lowered. Nowadays, they don't lower. They've got them pretty much sealed, I think, by all airports, all airlines.
So they landed the plane. He ransomed the passengers for $200,000, which was more money at the time than it is now. And the FBI brought him the money, bills that they had recorded the numbers on.
Yes, we would mark the bills using grease or powder or whatever the going chemical was, and we would, of course, take all the serial numbers. But just getting $200,000 ready to hand over is a tremendous job. It takes agent manpower, and you don't have $200,000 sitting ready to go in packs. The Federal Reserve, of course, is the basic source of money like that on the quick, where you've got to get it right now. You've got to deliver it. The man's getting impatient. He's in Seattle. He wants the money. He wants shoots. And misleading as it might be, he asked for 4 shoots.
And so, did the FBI make mistakes? Was it a mistake for them to give him this money, do you think? Would they handle this situation differently if it occurred again?
No, I don't think so. The first and primary thought always is the safety of the public. So if you have a hostage situation where a banker's taken, or an extortion situation, or a kidnapping, it doesn't matter. You comply for the time being with the demands of the person they think is running the show at the other end.
And so after he got the money, and he requested 4 parachutes, saying he was going to parachute out of the plane with the stewardesses, right?
Right. So you don't know what he's going to do. He's got extra parachutes. He keeps 1 or 2 stewardesses on. I've forgotten exactly now. Let's see. He did keep 1 on. And, of course, he had to keep the pilot, the co-pilot, and the navigator.
But that was it. He kept the skeleton crew on. He took off again. And then he parachuted out the back and was never heard from again.
Well, at least most of the people, I guess, that study these things feel he was never heard again. We're saying Richard Floyd McCoy was Dan Cooper, and he was shot in Norfolk Beach after an escape.
Now, tell us about the Richard Floyd McCoy hijacking. It occurred 6 months later? Is that right?
It could be, and this is similar too. The Cooper case was the eve of Thanksgiving in 71. The McCoy case was the eve in April, Easter, I think it was. Yeah, Easter.
Both on holidays.
Right, both just before holidays. Which makes sense because Richard Floyd McCoy was a student in college, a college student.
The sheer audacity of these crimes, I think, is going to guarantee that they have a place in Utah history going forward into the future. Now, the reasons that you believe that McCoy was D.B. Cooper are numerous, but you talk about something which no other book mentions, which is that the FBI has some evidence of who Cooper was from the original hijacking, which they're holding on to and which you know about and which suggests that it was McCoy. Among that evidence is a clip-on tie and a clasp that he left on the plane. Is that right?
That's correct. When we were in the writing process and editing process on this, and it took us 6 years, we recovered everything, tried to do all the records over, tried to do interviews over. So we were looking for anything that would tie it together, and I must admit, our objective, our very thought, was that these two were the same jumper. So one of the problems we did have at first was locating the clip-on tie and the pearl tie clasp. Mm-hmm. It's just a little bar, that goes across and keeps your tie in place from falling in your suit. Mm-hmm. But we finally located it, and it did exist, and it is being kept as evidence. Now, two items is much more important to identify with someone than is one.
Sure.
It would be much easier to have an accidental tie-in with one item. Very unusual to have it with two or more.
Sure.
Members of the family, his in-laws, McCoy's in-laws, did identify it as like Richard Floyd McCoy's. Now, the pearl tie class, the clip-on tie would be a little more common. It's one used typically military, quick dress age, Mm-hmm. But the pearl tie class would be a little unusual. Others had seen him wear that pearl tie clasp and identified photographs of it.
And so there are photographs of him with that
tie clasp,
wearing that tie clasp. Now, in your book, you also suggest that the FBI may have DNA evidence that could tie Cooper or McCoy to the Cooper case. Did he leave cigarette butts in the plane?
I'm unaware of any DNA possibility.
Okay.
DNA was a relatively new thing when this came down in 71 and 72.
Okay.
I'm not even sure that they were doing the exams at that time. But at any rate, I'm not aware of anything that would tie in DNA.
Did he leave cigarette butts in the plane?
There was both rumors that he did and he didn't. Now, he did smoke. I'm not sure whether those butts were sent in or not for examination right offhand. I know I did know at one time, but I can't remember right now.
Uh-huh. And with the FBI still, do they still have those cigarette butts, do you think, in case?
Well, we don't throw anything away in the effort, and they're used to in the FBI. Now, I've been out a long time, but we never threw anything away. Until the case was tried, it did appeal period where,
Russell, hold on with us through the break. Charlie 254-5855, Global 470-5855. We're talking about D.B. Cooper and the Richard Floyd McCoy skyjacking. We'll be right back. This is K-Talk. Please hold on through the break.
AM 630 KTKK.
Foreclosure is a nasty word most people don't like to face. Are you upside down in your house? Losing your house or giving it back to the bank is embarrassing and costly, so just don't do it. Call Specialist Darrell at 262-9980. Are you thinking that's too much hassle? No way. All you have to do is hire a specialist. Darrell, 262-9980. Paying high interest rates is a hassle. Not qualifying for a government or conventional mortgage is a hassle. Being denied credit is a hassle. Scummy people who take advantage of you are a hassle. Avoiding foreclosure is easy. Call Darrell at 262-9980. Landlords, employers, insurance, and utility companies make decisions based on your credit score. Our experience, tenacity, and creativity get you unsurpassed results. Visit us on the web at UtahHouseValues.com or call Daryl Catmull of Destiny Real Estate at 262-9980. That's UtahHouseValues.com. UtahHouseValues.com.
Radio. It's the hottest medium in the world, and now you can be part of it. Here's a chance to join the K-Talk team as a show producer and call screener. This non-salaried volunteer position could be your first step in an exciting broadcast career. Get the details by calling 253-4883. Call 253-4883 to see if you can become part of the team at K-Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Steve Reinhardt. I'm your host. This is K-Talk. We're talking about the D.B. Cooper hijacking. We have Russ Callum on the phone. He wrote a book, D.B. Cooper, The Real McCoy. Co-authored it with Bernie Rhodes. I guess he did the research for Bernie Rhodes. We're very happy to have him on the air. Salt Lake 254-5855, Provo 470-5855. Russell, are you still with us?
Sure.
Well, we were talking about, I was about to ask you a few questions about McCoy. Now, McCoy was a BYU student. He was married with 2 kids. He was a Sunday school teacher. Tell us a little bit about him. What did he do with his life before he did this second hijacking for sure that he was convicted of?
Well, you know, he was an interesting person. He was very active. He had served twice in Vietnam, pretty much at his request the second time to go back.
Now,
he was decorated twice. And very brave. He was almost to the point of, I don't know that this is a fair description of him, but I got the feeling he was almost reckless with his life. He had problems in the marriage, no question about it, and that's one reason he went back, I'm sure, the second time and asked for service abroad. He had some health problems. He had very large ears. He had been nicknamed as a kid Dumbo. In fact, his ears were operated on and reduced in size while he was in Leavenworth. You know, they do those operations to improve the self-esteem of a prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
And they take him to and kind of how bad the situation is.
Mm-hmm.
But all in all, he was likable. I remember interviewing him very briefly. When the fellows brought him in on a Sunday morning after the arrest, we exercised the warrant and the arrest warrant. One of the agents who was doing the basic interview said, Russ, come on over to the interview room. I'd like you to meet him. And I went over, introduced myself. He did the same. He was very polite. But he said, you guys will never hold me. I'll escape. And he said it like he meant it, and he did escape. He escaped twice.
Which, you know, because of the audacity of his crime, because he escaped from prison, because he was eventually killed after he escaped, I think this is something, like I said before, that is going to endure in Utah history. I got the sense after reading your book that this whole story is just covered with a shade of tragedy.
It is. There's no question about it. It's a very sad, sad situation. And all the things that drove him to it, all the thoughts he had, I can't really speculate on that. I think I know some of it, but I'm really putting forth any of it because I'm not that sure. When you start to deal with somebody's inner mind and his thoughts, you're in dangerous territory. You think you know somebody, and your neighbor does something, or somebody in the neighborhood, and you wonder, I never would have suspected. I've heard that so many times. He couldn't have done it. He's not that kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
But he did do it. Or she did it.
Most of what I know about McCoy I learned from your book, but I've learned a couple of other things about him outside outside your book. Like you mentioned, he was a very devoted member of the Mormon Church. I learned he actually baptized most of his platoon under fire in Vietnam.
I believe that's true. At least he did some of them. I don't know how many.
Some of the people who've researched his life feel like he was committed to the church. He was a convert to the church from North Carolina.
That's correct.
And that he seems to have been such a good guy. They feel like maybe Vietnam warped his mind, and that he was trained to be an Army Ranger, to fly these helicopters, to kill.
Well, he was a fixed-wing pilot as well as an helicopter pilot. And some of his service in Vietnam, when you read about the awards that he won and the citations, it's impressive. So the man had courage. There's no question. You don't jump out of the back of an airplane at those speeds in the night in strange territory unless you got courage.
A couple of things you may be interested in. There are a couple of people here in Salt Lake that are trying to get a McCoy Act passed, a federal statute that would mandate downward departure in the sentencing guidelines for convicted felons who have served their country honorably, almost as a recognition that perhaps, serving in the military, they deserve some respect, and when their future's handled by the government later on, and also that maybe the military has encouraged them to act in ways they wouldn't normally act otherwise. Also, there's at least one person here in Salt Lake who would like the LDS Church to reinstate his membership. We have some more questions for you. We have to take another quick commercial break. This is only 2 minutes. Can you hold on the line with us, Russell? Salt Lake 254-5855, Provo 470-5855. This is K-Talk. We're talking about the D.B. Cooper hijacking and whether Richard Floyd McCoy, a BYU student, was D.B. Cooper. He committed the second hijacking a few months later. We'll be right back with Russell Callum.
AM 630 KTKK.
Oh, come on now. You've never been to Plaza Grill before? Oh, you've been there. So you know what I'm talking about. A mouth-watering flavor that you only get with Brazilian barbecue beef. Salad bar. For desserts. Friendly folks. And on top of that, can you imagine? All-you-can-eat seafood every Monday night. Well, you can eat prime rib every Wednesday night. Plaza Grill. Now that's Brazilian.
Plaza Grill, 5927 South State in Murray. Plaza Grill, Plaza Grill.
Hello, I'm Linda Bills with Keller Williams Realty. You've heard our radio ads about the Simple Selling Solution, which offers you flexible commissions and the right to fire me if you're not satisfied. But wait, there's more. I guarantee that I will sell your home in 30 days or less, or I will do it for free. That's right, free. What else can I say? A good realtor walks you through every step of your sale or purchase. A great realtor does that, plus stands behind their work by giving you a 30-day guarantee. Remember, I'm not bragging. I'm simply applying for a job. I want to be your realtor. Want to find out more? Call me, Linda Bills, 347-3384. Flexible commissions, cancel any time, and a 30-day guarantee. Linda Bills, 347-3384. Or check us out on the web, thesaltlakemls.com. Some conditions apply.
We're back. This is K-Talk. I'm Steve Reinhardt, your host. We're talking about the D.B. Cooper hijacking in 1971, the only unsolved hijacking in U.S. history. After it was committed, there was another hijacking, very similar. We're going to talk about some of the similarities in a minute to the D.B. Cooper hijacking, for which a BYU student, Richard Floyd McCoy, was arrested, given 45 years in prison. He escaped from prison and was later killed. We've got Russell Callum on the phone with us, a former FBI agent who did the research for and co-authored a book with Bernie Rhodes, D.B. Cooper, The Real McCoy. If you have questions for Russell Callum, we're going to try to get some calls in a few minutes. Salt Lake 254-5855, Provo 470-5855, Ogden 670-5855. Russell, are you still with us?
Yes. Steve, may I make one correction?
Yes, sure.
For what you said. You're close to the truth. But I was the researcher.
Okay.
What I would do, and the reason they wanted me to be co-author, but if I'm an author, I have to submit under an administrative ruling to the Justice Department materials to them for approval.
I see.
And I thought it was Bernie's idea. And so what I did is any of the material that I furnished him was rough drafted, and then he had the final say. I might implore him to turn this down and build this up, but I didn't really have the final say.
I see. Okay. Well, we appreciate you making that clarification, and certainly Bernie Rhodes is to be complimented for.
Well, he's a good writer.
Yeah, it was a very interesting book, published by University of Utah Press. It can still be purchased on Amazon. We'll tell you in a minute how to buy it from Russell himself here in Salt Lake. Well, we were talking about McCoy and the reasons he may have hijacked his plane and may have hijacked the D.B. Cooper flight before that. Tell me something. Was he under pressure from his family?
I think he did feel a lot of pressure. That was one of the reasons I feel he went off the deep end and committed this. It intrigued him. There's no question in my mind. The whole thought process of getting away with something intrigued him. And a lot of a criminal element does have the feeling, you know, if they can beat the system, beat somebody, whether it's an embezzlement or whatever, there is that thought on a lot of people's part.
Now, it's just amazing to me that somebody would actually try this, and even more amazing that were he not turned in by those he trusted, he would have gotten away with the second hijacking, would he not have?
Well, he would have for a while at least. Now, how long it would have taken us to solve it, I don't know. I think we got some good breaks. I think we made some good breaks. All breaks don't come gratitude-free. Some breaks you create yourself. I like to use the example, if I can take a sec.
Sure.
There's, in some cases, let's take case A. You might solve that case by 6 different routes, any one of which you chose through your judgment at the time, knowing what you did at the time, to do it this way, that way, or another way. All of them might lead to a solution. But there's a lot of cases that there's only really one route available. And if you make a judgment error based on what you know at a given time, and your knowledge is changing as you proceed with investigation. So there is that difference. Whether we decided it quickly or not, I don't know.
Now, to review a couple details about the hijacking, this was Flight 305 out of San Diego, is that right?
Not San Diego, Seattle.
Oh, out of Seattle, okay. Out of Seattle. And he landed, ransomed the passengers for $500,000.
Now, you're mixing the cases. On the McCoy case, he got on the plane in Denver.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's what I was thinking. I am trying to talk about the McCoy case. So he got on the plane in Denver.
He redirected it to San Francisco from L.A. It was destined to go to L.A.
I was thinking San Diego. Okay. And there he landed on the taxiway, ransomed the passengers, this time for
he told them where to land it, what direction to face it.
So he had some knowledge of aviation,
obviously. Oh, he knew exactly. And he had been at that airport.
And he then took off again, once again with a skeleton crew, flew up I-15 from southern Utah and parachuted out of the plane over Provo in 1971.
That's right. He threw a parachute out near, well, it was out in the desert in Nevada. I couldn't tell you how many miles right offhand from Tonopah, but that was a misleading calculation, misleading to us, but deliberate, I think, on his part. He threw that parachute out to make us think he had jumped.
And then he didn't, in fact, jump until he hit Springville.
That is correct.
And so what did the FBI do when he finally jumped out of the plane? I mean, were there fighters following the plane? We had agents from San Francisco, and this was a tribute to the SAC out there, who was Bob, oh boy, I'm not even a contemporary. Anyhow, he designated agents after they loaded the parachutes and the money and all, gave it over to McCoy, whose identity is unknown. Just he's the skyjacker. And the only person who even saw him was the stewardess who was sending the notes he was writing to the pilots.
That's right. She took that note up to the pilot. He read it. It was hand-written, hand-printed. hand-lettered, I should say, to be correct. And when the pilot finished with it, she stuck it in her bra. And so she had a sample of the Skyjacker's handwriting. That was Diane Sedan, the stewardess that did that. It was good thinking on her part.
And he asked for the notes back so that they couldn't keep handwriting samples.
But he missed that one.
Missed this one. And what kind of analysis was done on that note? Was the handwriting analysis done?
No, I've forgotten exactly which. No, it was one of the last. But I hesitate to quote it because it is in the book.
It is in the book. That's right. I read about it there. Did they do any handwriting analysis of that? Or
yes, they did.
And obviously it was McCoy's because they caught him for that one.
Yeah, Lewison got his military records, which had some writing of his in it. And then we compared that writing with the handwriting on the note. And I got a call about, I'd just gotten into bed. I'd been working since Thursday night late, Friday morning early, and let's see, it was then Saturday night. Well, after 24, 48 hours, you're dead tired. And I had put a crew on. I was beginning to level different crews for shifts so that we could keep it going. But I was dead dog tired. I'd just gotten home, and I got a call from one of my old friends, contemporary in the laboratory. In fact, he used to work about 2 acres away from where I was. He called me and said, I'm in Rosa.
Can you hold on a second through the break? Quick 2-minute break. We'll be right back. K-Talk 254-5855, 404-705-5855, log 670-5855. Take some calls on the next segment. We've got Russell Callum with us. He did the research for D.B. Cooper, the real McCoy. We're talking about D.B. Cooper and Richard Floyd McCoy. We'll be right back.
AM 630 KTKK.
Life a little cluttered? Let's talk business. Store and lock self-storage is a good business decision. Call 566-8900. Gain extra office space. Increase retail sales space. Enjoy clutter-free work environment. Organize important documents. Access your storage 7 days a week. Could your business use a little room to grow? Many storage sizes to choose from, 5x5 to 10x25. Store and lock is convenient, saves you money, and be secure. Store and lock, 8620 South, 300 West, or call 566-8900. That's 566-8900. When life becomes cluttered, stuff it at Store and Lock, 566-8900. Missing you heard this ad on K-Talk Radio and get a free lock or storage supplies. That's 566-8900. Store and Lock.
Son, you're a young man now. I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about men and women.
I know all about that stuff.
Well, you might know a little biology, but do you know how to treat a woman?
I guess I could use a little direction. So how do I treat a woman, Dad?
You know, I'm not going to tell you. You have to figure that out by yourself.
How?
Well, first I suggest you watch a lot of bad TV and violent movies and observe how women get treated there.
Okay. I'm kind of doing that already. What else?
Well, let's see. Oh, yeah. When you're at school, be sure to take careful note of what irresponsible older boys say.
I sure will.
Sometimes the only message boys get is the wrong one. Many young men need advice and direction on how to behave towards women. You can help provide it. By teaching boys early that violence against women is wrong, you can help prevent domestic violence. For tips on what to say, visit www.endabuse.org. End Abuse. Teach early. This message is brought to you by the Ad Council and the Family Violence Prevention Fund.
Goji berries, now available at water wellness centers, are perhaps the most nutritionally rich fruit on the planet. Goji berries contain rich amounts of trace minerals and include 500 times the vitamin C of oranges and 10 times the antioxidants of blueberries and 8 times the amino acids of bee pollen. The family Queen Yarn lived to the age of 252 years old and consumed goji berries daily. Get some today at any of the water wellness centers in West Valley, Salt Lake, or South Jordan. Visit Water Wellness today and get your goji berries.
Welcome back. I'm Steve Reinhardt. I'm your host. We're talking to Russell Callum. He did the research for D.B. Cooper, the real McCoy. We're talking about the D.B. Cooper hijacking and whether D.B. Cooper was a BYU student named Richard Floyd McCoy. Russell did the research for a very interesting book on this subject, the one I just mentioned. He's a former FBI agent. Thank you for being with us, Russell.
I appreciate the opportunity. I'm sorry I have to cut it a little short.
Well, we know you've just had surgery, and we'll just ask you a couple follow-up questions and let you go for just a couple minutes. Well, maybe you can tell us, since we don't have a lot of time left, let's just cut to Richard's escape. He escaped from prison. How, and how was he caught after?
Garbage truck through the Sally gates. The Sally port is where it's enclosed, and they can open one end, put the prisoner, the truck, or whatever, the food coming in the Sally port, then open the other gate, and of course close one and open the other. So it's a little like a lock, and that's the idea, to keep somebody from. And they just went through it with a very big garbage truck. They hijacked it, 4 of them, including one of them being McCoy.
And then the other 2 were caught.
They split 2 and 2. And the one that went with McCoy, he said later, and we interviewed him over the weekend, we brought him up from Houston, and he was very ill. We took him to dinner, but he'd spent more years in prison at that point than he had out.
And that was...
He was going to a foreign bank robber. But he was a great guy, and we interviewed him. He brought about 46 pages of notes, so he remembered great detail. And he and Richard ended up in the swamps in Richard's old home area of North Carolina.
Now, did he ever tell his cellmates while in prison that he was D.B. Cooper? Did he talk about it ever?
He never admitted it, nor did he deny it to us or anybody else that we ever knew.
And the FBI...
We gave him opportunities. Now, remember, we couldn't interview him until after he was convicted. He asked for an attorney the first day of the arrest, and we have to honor that. And, of course, once he has an attorney says no interview. And so we didn't interview him until really after the conviction.
Now, his attorney was Dave Winder, who later became a federal judge. We talked about him earlier. Richard thanked him for doing a good job defending him. Do you think Richard's family, his wife Karen and Karen's sister Denise, were they responsible for turning him in, or that he was arrested after?
Certainly the wife was not. The sister-in-law, she blabbed. She blabbed to the wrong people, and those people helped us.
And are they still around today? They still live here in Utah?
As far as I know, I re-interviewed everybody that was involved in that. And, of course, this is some years ago now. And they were around, they were alive. I should say they were alive, they were around.
And so how did the FBI locate Richard after he escaped? He robbed a few banks with his...
Well, it was a detailed search. And it took from about August of the year he escaped to November to get him.
So he was out for... So how many months is that?
Well, it's a couple of months, and he was shot, of course. Interestingly enough, the first agent to his side was a young first office agent whose assignment at the time they staked out the house where we thought Richard and his associate were residing. He was assigned into the bushes that were just outside the front door. So he was the first one to get to Richard after he was shot. And his name was Joseph Smith, a Catholic boy, brand new first office agent.
Another reason, but it's a story that people are likely to talk about going into the future.
It's just some unbelievable things. But this is true in almost any criminal case. And I've been involved in a lot of major cases, from air crashes, extortions, hostage situations, bank robberies, kidnapping. I led the 42nd one after Lindbergh. And there's just always some things. The good Lord is on the side of right. I'm convinced of it.
Tell us quickly about some of the other cases that you've seen that have been as crazy as the McCoy case. You mentioned you've seen hijackings, in addition to the McCoy hijacking?
Well, there were two more that were here. The President of the United States sent a letter out saying we were the anti-skyjacking office of the country. This office had more major cases on last year, more commendations, more outstandings, more money awards than any other office in the country, as far as I know. And you say, how come Salt Lake City? Well, it just centered, and we had them one right after the other. And of course, one of them was the 42nd kidnapping of 9-year-old, I guess memory days when we get home. The 1-year-old white kidnapped 4 ransom, and we, of course, were on the research route trying to figure out where to put the money out, per the instructions. And it was to be thrown out the day after we found the car that was described in the letter as a kidnapped victim.
Let me ask you one more question, and we'll let you go. I know that you're in pain recovering from surgery, and we'll tell people how to get a hold of the book quickly. But why do you think these other officers, it seems the case you make that McCoy was Cooper is so compelling, why do you think other authors deny it? Do they want there to be a mystery? Do they want...
Well, I think that there hasn't been a whole lot written since our book, because I think it took the fight up. There were so many books that surmised and guessed, and they were just figments of imagination. I'm not going to name them, but there's 2 or 3 that I've read. They really didn't have the facts. We know both there. We know.
Well, before we let you go, tell us quickly one more time, our readers, how they can get a hold of your book and how they can contact you.
Email me at MaryRush21, which is my phone. At AOL.
At AOL, okay. Well, once again, to our readers, the book was D.B. Cooper, The Real McCoys, written by Bernie Rhodes. The research was done by Russell Callum, former FBI agent involved in the case, who we've had on the air today. We thank you, Russell, very much for coming on the air.
Thank you for having me.
This interview will be posted on StephenReinhart.com in about a week. The site will be going up. We'll let you go here, Russell. Thanks again.
Thanks again.
This is K-Talk, and each Saturday at 1 o'clock I explore fringe issues of Utah history, past and present, historical, cultural, religious, and political topics. The D.B. Cooper hijacking is one of those fascinating corners of Utah history that we want to explore on the show. It's interesting that Russell mentioned that his Salt Lake office, during the time that he was there, was involved in more of these larger cases than almost any other office in the country. You would think that Salt Lake would be a calm place, but apparently not. There have been other criminals in Utah history that have been, they tend to have been super criminals. You've had Ted Bundy, who was here. He went to law school at the University of Utah. You have Mark Hoffman, who forged all sorts of documents from Egyptian papyrus to coins, even a document called the Library of Congress. We'll come right back a little bit more on D.B. Cooper. This is K-Talk 254-5855. If you have a comment, give us a call. Global 470-5855. I'm Steve Reinhart.
AM 630 KTKK.
Hey, Margie, what are you doing?
Hi, Jack. It's a little nippy, so I thought I'd make fine use of the fireplace.
Hey, what's that? You're using
a phone directory for kindling. I know.
But why? We do so much good.
Jack, look at the cover. There, under the log. What do you see?
Too scared to look.
Well, I see that it doesn't say Dex on it, which tells me a few things.
I'm listening.
It tells me that it's not the most complete, that it doesn't have more businesses, more information, more of what I need. It tells me there's no reason to use it.
Is that why it's in the fireplace and I'm under the sink?
You are happy under the sink.
Sink's great. I love Under the Sink. It's the best ever, Dex. The most complete directory in town is the most used directory in town. In fact, people in Salt Lake City turn to Dex nearly 75% of the time. It's got all the local info you need when you need it. Will I be in the fireplace one day?
Don't be silly, Dex. Next year, I'll just recycle you. Comforter.
Dex, the one that gets used. Dex knows.
Watch for your new Dex Salt Lake City Yellow Pages, coming to your door soon. To get additional directories or a CD-ROM, call 1-800-422-8793. Would you like to earn a guaranteed 6.7% on your money with no state income tax? Would you like a more secure financial future? Hear the truth about investments. Tune in to Joe Battaglia on The American Advisor Monday through Fridays at 3 p.m. right here on KTAR. Listen daily to learn the fundamentals of investing so you can protect your family from losing stocks and a falling dollar. You will learn what's happening to the economy, how to create a diversified portfolio, and how to prosper in any market environment. Joe also provides valuable information on 401k and other retirement accounts and provides practical advice on protecting the purchasing power of your savings account. Call in and you'll receive a free silver coin. Tune in to The American Advisor with your host, Joe Battaglia, Monday through Fridays at 3 o'clock, right here on KTAR, the voice of Utah.
Welcome back to K-Talk. I'm Steve Reinhardt. I'm your host. This has been The Unspoken Word, where Utah's culture, history, politics, and religion collide. We tell you everything you never knew you wanted to know. Earlier, we had Russell Callum on. He did the research for this book, D.B. Cooper, The Real McCoy, discussing whether a BYU student, Richard Floyd McCoy, was D.B. Cooper, the famous unsolved hijacking out of Seattle.
What was he studying at BYU?
I've got Trevor Buford here in studio with me. Really quickly, let me throw out the phone numbers and thank our sponsors. It's all 254-5855, Pro 470-5855. We want to thank I4 Solutions, who's doing the website for this show. It'll be at StephenReinhardt.com. They've done many websites for me in the past, and I'm doing an ad lib for them without them even paying me. They do great websites. Call them 294-6400 if you or your company needs one. But I'm sorry, Trevor. What did you ask?
What did McCoy study at BYU?
McCoy, ironically, studied criminal justice at BYU and then hijacked the plane. I guess I thought it was out of San Diego. It was out of Denver. Russell corrected me. And I mentioned earlier, which I want to talk about a little bit about, there are a lot of people who feel like it's just such a tragedy. He hijacks this plane. Obviously, he committed a horrible act, but he got the Medal of Valor, one step, I think, below the Medal of Honor in Vietnam. And he was a devoted father. Even after he was excommunicated, he continued to go to church, and he was converted to the Mormon Church. He baptized most of his platoon under fire. There's people who would like to have his membership reinstated, just as the church did for John D. Lee in the Mountain Meadows Massacre. They reinstated his membership after excommunicating him and executing him for that crime. And then there's even some people who feel like he represents a problem that we have in society, which is that veterans are trained to be violent, trained to attack people, and then they come home and still have those tendencies.
They're not untrained.
Yeah, they don't get untrained. They get a medal in one case for being violent, and they get jail time in another case for being violent. And so there's an act which, it's proposed to be called the Richard Floyd McCoy Act, which would mandate downward departure in the sentencing guidelines for for veterans convicted of federal crimes. The federal sentencing guidelines are very strict. You go away for a long, long time. And I support it. I think it would be a good idea for veterans to get a little bit of a break in their sentencing for violent crimes after they've served their country. How do you feel about that?
I think we don't do enough for our veterans, and I don't know. It definitely would be an incentive to become a veteran if you get less time, but I think not enough is done to help treat them.
I don't think enough is done to help our vets after they come back from a battlefront to kind of, I guess they get debriefed, but they don't really get trained in culture, I guess. It's a difficult situation for them.
Well, one thing I didn't mention earlier, Russell, Barney, and the University of Utah Press got sued by McCoy's ex-wife, former wife, for writing this book, D.B. Cooper, The Real McCoy. Apparently everybody's afraid of her. They want to make a movie of it, but they're afraid she's going to sue him for making the movie. She was kind of shady, may have been kind of a shady character. They suggested in the book that she may have taken some of his loot and gotten immunity later on and not charged with it, and that her sister-in-law, or her sister Denise, and her together may have been responsible for some of the things that happened to McCoy, pressuring him to do what he did and then turning him in later. It'd be interesting to talk to her about that. I'm sure her views are different, but
she seems to have been able to successfully sue and scare everybody from even talking about this case.
And she didn't get a settlement. The case was dismissed, so nothing became of it. But yeah, it's not a story I think she wants people talking about. And I think that's why a lot of people haven't heard about the case.
But a lot of people claim they won't talk about the case till either she's dead or, a lot of the other parties involved are dead. And
right. And there's at least a couple people still alive who we would really like to interview about the case and put the interviews on the internet. She'd be one of them. I don't think she'll come on. We haven't even tried to get a hold of her. Another one would be Dave Winder, who's a federal district court judge. He defended McCoy before he became a judge. And Judge Ritter, who was the judge at the time, gave McCoy the maximum sentence, 45 years. Judge Ritter was known to be an anti-Mormon. Several prominent politicians tried to have him removed from the bench for sentencing Mormons so harshly. He's made derogatory comments in his courtroom about the LDS Church all the time. And I spoke with Judge Winder and asked him to come on. He was considering it, but I think just for reasons of attorney-client privilege, which still continues to this day, even 30 years later, and because of issues relating to his judgeship, he didn't want to. But anyway, this has been our show on D.B. Cooper. It'll be on the end.com. I'm Steve Reinhardt. I'm your host. He brings you issues of Utah history. Take up.
AM 630 KTKK.